Welcome back to Network Africa. Now, just yesterday, March 14th, it was exactly 2 years after at least 640 recaptured detainees were allegedly slaughtered by soldiers of the Nigerian army. Amnesty International maintains that the Nigerian authorities have failed to conduct an effective, impartial and independent investigation into the killings. Yet, despite repeated promises by President Muhammadu Buhari and his government that Amnesty International's report would be looked into, there have been no concrete steps taken to begin independent investigations. Now, many safeguards remain absent. For example, suspects continue to be held in military detention without access to their lawyers or families, without charge and without being brought before a judge. Amnesty International extensively documented the events of March 14, 2014, interviewing dozens of witnesses, verifying video evidence of the killings and their aftermath, and confirming the locations of mass graves through satellite imagery. Let's learn more now about what happened that day, March 14, 2014. 640 people were allegedly slaughtered by the Nigerian army soldiers, victims arrested in mass operations. Also, a majority of victims were shot. Others had their throats slit. Amnesty has been calling for justice since then, and its members gathered outside of embassies to call for independent investigations. Joining me now from London is Amnesty International's Daniel. He is a Nigerian researcher for the group. Daniel, thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you.
Do we know for certain that these killings were actually carried out by the Nigerian soldiers? Have there been any investigations as regards this?
So we are 100% certain of what happened that day. We've spoken to dozens of witnesses, we've analysed video and photographic evidence, we've even got satellite images which show the locations of possible mass graves where these detainees were buried. Let me give you an example of the testimony one person gave me. I spoke to a man at a checkpoint, a military checkpoint in Maiduguri, and he watched as members of the Civilian Joint Task Force rearrested and gathered groups of these escaped detainees. They brought them to soldiers at the checkpoint, and the soldiers there forced them to lie down and then opened fire on them. These people were unarmed men and boys that posed no threat to anyone's lives. And several witnesses I spoke to who were at that scene told me that they counted almost 200 bodies killed there. So we're absolutely confident of what happened, and many witnesses actually identified individual soldiers or Civilian Joint Task Force members in these various different locations around Maiduguri where killings took place. And yet 2 years on, none of those people have been brought to justice. So that's why we're calling for independent investigations.
Well, understandably so, Daniel, but these witnesses you're talking about, have they ever come out to speak to authorities? Have they gathered themselves into a group or something? And do they have a voice? Who's speaking for them? Is Amnesty International speaking for these victims?
I mean, we try to speak to as many independent witnesses as possible. For something like the GIWA barracks killings, where more than 640 people were killed in different locations, that means independent corroborating, speaking to independent witnesses in each of the different locations where people were killed. So that's what we've done. And these killings happened on the streets of Maiduguri. People were watching from their homes. Many people have seen the killings that took place that day. So that's why we're saying that independent investigations that can gain the trust of the witnesses that exist in northeast Nigeria can easily find the evidence that we have.
I know you must have presented these findings to the Nigerian government, as Amnesty International has also made reports about soldier brutality to civilians, especially in the fight against Boko Haram. Apart from a promise from the government, what other assurances have you received from the Nigerian government that these allegations will be looked into?
Well, that's exactly right. What we've had so far has been promises. In President Buhari's first week, he said that he would leave no stone unturned in investigating our evidence. Now, we haven't yet seen concrete action taken towards those investigations, but we're still hopeful that the government will fulfill its promises. And the important thing is that we believe that Nigeria has the capacity to investigate these war crimes and possible crimes against humanity. So we're hoping to continue to lobby, to advocate with the government to make these investigations a reality.
Daniel, I'm sure this is not the first time, Amnesty has brought up allegations like these. Research that has been done on, war-torn areas, places where there have been crisis and the army has overstepped its boundaries and so on. What does Amnesty really do apart from sending reports to the governments and making people know what's going on? What else does Amnesty do to help the situation?
So that's really our primary role. We're there to expose what's happened and to campaign to bring an end to injustice and to bring justice for the victims of these abuses. So in northeast Nigeria, we've documented the atrocities committed by Boko Haram. We've spoken about the thousands of people that they've killed, the villages that have been wiped off the face of the earth by the group. We've spoken about the abduction of children by Boko Haram and how even some of them have been used as suicide bombers by the group. But at the same time, we've been documenting the crimes committed by the Nigerian military. In our most recent report, we said that more than 1,200 men and boys have been extrajudicially executed by the armed forces, that more than 7,000 people have died in military detention facilities due to the most inhuman conditions imaginable. We've looked at how thousands of people have been arrested and held without charge, without any access to their lawyers. So by bringing this to light, we hope that we can convince the government to make a change in these situations. And we're asking the government to do three things here. We want them to independently investigate. We want them to introduce safeguards to make sure these violations don't happen again in the future. And we want them to change the law in support of these reforms. But these crimes are of global concern. War crimes and crimes against humanity, they affect the whole of the world. And so that's why there are international legal mechanisms in place, such as the International Criminal Court, that if governments don't show the willingness or the ability to investigate, then the ICC is able to step in. And now in Nigeria, what the ICC has said is that there is sufficient evidence to warrant investigations. So like Amnesty and like the people of northeast Nigeria, the ICC is waiting to see what the government's going to do, to see if it will initiate these independent investigations.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa. Appreciate your joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Amnesty International's Daniel joining us on the investigations on the GIWA 640. But still to come on Network Africa, the post-election violence in Uganda continues as protesters from both sides clash. We'll have details in a moment.